sing that, if we can feel. I guess you're singing another selection. But we can feel truly God's Spirit breathing over us and through us. There we go. Just can't keep the music down, that's all. Thank you so much for that blessing, Pastor Sharon. And I pray God's Spirit really does move in and through us. I can't believe that it's already the 4th Sunday of Advent and Christmas is upon us. Time just marches on. And I thought about that not only in terms of this last few weeks, or month, or this season, but even in another way, how time marches on. I was born in 1964. That's no surprise to anyone because last year we celebrated my 50th birthday here pretty publicly, so I guess everybody knows. And 1964, if you're a student of history at all, was 20 years after the end of World War II. Now, when I was growing up, World War II was ancient history. It was so far in the back, you know, we studied it, right? We read about it, we heard about it, we even knew that there were folks among us who had experienced it, but still it was this ancient history, right? And yet when I have come to that marker of, 50 years, and, you get a little bit of perspective on life and realize, you know what? There's more time to my lifespan than there was between my birth and the end of that war. It was actually double that and then some 50 years ago. It kind of makes you stop and take a moment to mark that. And as yesterday marked the 20th birthday of my youngest of 4 children, it sort of kind of puts into perspective what 20 years is all about. And so I realized that as this week we were also receiving registrations for our confirmation retreat in January, that they were asking us for that retreat, the ages of those who were coming. And I realized that for every one of our confirmands, anything that starts with 19-something is ancient history. Because not one of our confirmands was born on the other side of that great divide that we called Y2K. You remember that? You remember when that was the big thing that was to come, and now we're well past and well beyond that. And so I realized that if that is ancient history, then some things that have happened in my lifetime also are ancient history, because none of those confirmands will remember, other than reading about it in history books, the year 1989, and it was not an insignificant year. You see, in 1989, a group of people with their pastor began to gather together on a regular basis every Monday night in their church. That church was not just anywhere, it was in the city of Leipzig, Germany. A city where my mother's brother, my uncle, to this day still lives in that city. And as they were in the city of Leipzig gathering together to pray, they were in the country that was called the GDR. We used to call it DDR in German. GDR, which was the German Democratic Republic. But it wasn't run in a particularly efficient way, so it wasn't all that German, because the Germans do everything efficiently. It was certainly not democratic, and it was not a republic. It was a communist-controlled state in which everything was organized and fashioned by the communist bloc that controlled that part of the world at that time. And when this group of people met together to pray, it wasn't only in that particular city, in that particular country, but it was a particular church. It was St. Nikolai Kirche, St. Nicholas Church. St. Nicholas Church in Leipzig is famous for a music director they had a couple of hundred years before, Maybe you've heard of Johann Sebastian Bach. That was the church where he played. That was where he wrote his music. That was the church that benefited firsthand from the beauty of the music that God sent through his servants. And so in that church, they gathered together to pray, and they had their pastor, and I think it's just amazing that the pastor's name is Christian Führer. So Christian, it tells me that he's a child of God, right? Does this kind of connect for you? For those of you who don't know, her son is Christian. He is a child of God, and so he acknowledges God as his head, as his leader. And the name Führer, which actually in German means leader, which actually, of course, was the title that was appropriated by himself by the crazy Austrian man who ran that part of the world, namely Adolf Hitler. But here was a man coming, Christian Führer, a Christian leader whose father had been part of the resistance as a Lutheran pastor himself during the war, and now here he was leading people together to pray. And so they gathered week after week in 1989 to pray in their church. And they were fearful because there was this organization in the GDR called the Stasi. The Stasi was the feared German secret police that was very much a part of their reality in that day. And so they were always afraid they could be infiltrated, they could be reported, but worse than that, they feared as they gathered together that the Stasi would implement what was called the Chinese solution. Okay, history folks, what was the Chinese solution? Well, Cultural Revolution, but more directly and more immediately, 1989 was also just after Tiananmen Square. And the Chinese solution, which had already been endorsed by the German Democratic Republic's president as a good thing, a massacre of their own people. And so these folks in St. Nikolai Kirche, praying together, were afraid. But they didn't let the fear stop them. They gathered together week after week, and first it was a few, and then it was a few tens, and then it was a few hundreds, and then it was a few thousands, and eventually it became 300,000 people joining together, marching, putting up banners on the front of St. Nikolai Kirche saying, Freiheit, freedom. And it began to become a movement that spread, of course, to Berlin. And in Berlin, we know, eventually in that same year, the Berlin Wall finally came down. Much to the surprise of all who had ever experienced it, it separated my family from one to the other side, because we had family living on both sides and experiencing life on both sides of that. And the fear that they had about being shot, at being gunned down mercilessly, was not realized. Because what did these people do? They did not give in to the fear. They did not capitulate. They did not retreat. They did not apologize for prayer. They continued on in their peaceful negotiations. And so when they prayed, they did something else too. They prayed, and they lit candles. Because candles are a sign of God's presence and God's hope. And you know what else they did? They turned to each other and they said, sing your song. your song. And you know what song they sang? We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. And you know what? There was a report that eventually they went and asked the police forces, the Stasi, after all this had happened, after the walls had come down and history, worldwide history was being changed, they said, how come you didn't shoot? We expected you to. We were anticipating. We feared it in the depths of our soul, but it didn't happen. How come you didn't shoot? And their response was, we didn't have a contingency plan for song. And so the song changed world history in that time. And folks, for some of you young folks born after the year 2000, that may seem like ancient history, but it's really not that long ago. My brother-in-law and sister, who live in the city of Berlin, in 1990, when I had the chance to visit there, took us to the place, and I was able to purchase at that point 2 pieces of the Berlin Wall. Oh, and I held those close, right? But you know what happens to things that you hold close? The things, not the people now, but the things that you hold close, you can't do that too long. And so eventually I ended up giving 1 piece to a colleague of mine when I was leaving where I was working with the New York City Presbytery. And you know what I did with the other piece? When I was in seminary, Darlene, I had the opportunity to travel to your home country. I traveled to Cuba with a group, and Odell's. Traveled to Cuba with a group of seminary students. And somehow I managed to take one of those pieces of the Berlin Wall with me. And I was told, don't do it because you're going to be stupid. You're going to give it away. And I said, I'll never give it away. You know what I did? I gave it away because I realized that stones can be built up into walls to separate people. But when those walls are knocked down, you can use those stones all over again and build what Peter calls a living household from living stones. And so I gave it to a young brother in Christ and said, here, because I know that walls can come down between countries, and someday maybe relations between the United States and Cuba will have an opportunity to be in interchange and exchange once again. Oh my, does that happen? And so, folks, keep on singing your song. Just like Mary sang that song when she recognized what was happening to her when Elizabeth, her elderly cousin, who was, oh my God, pregnant with a child who was to be John the Baptist. Zechariah didn't even believe that it could happen or that it would happen. But when Elizabeth recognized Mary, she said the baby leapt up in joy. And then Mary sang a song like Zechariah sang a song like Simeon. Do you remember Simeon, the old prophet? When Mary and Joseph finally, after Jesus was born, brought him into the temple, Simeon said, my eyes have seen the salvation of Israel. Sing the song. Don't stop singing. Folks, sometimes I get up in the middle of the week, in the morning, and I feel that there's a song in my mind, and I stop and I say, oh, you know what? We sang that on Sunday. And so I have to sing it again because something in my spirit is saying, sing that song. And that song is going to lift you. Whatever it is that you're in, whatever it is that you're going through, sing your song. And let it come forth. Because it will be of encouragement to you. And God only knows it might be of encouragement to somebody around you who maybe needs to hear that song, or who maybe needs to be blessed in some other way. I want to share with you, just in closing, I hope this is still open, yes. I want to share with you a poem that was written just last week in response to today's gospel by a pastor named Ken Stork. And I sense in him, Mike, a companion spirit to yours because of how he writes. So listen to this poem that he entitled simply, Sing. Notes from a flute or a medieval recorder, madrigals sing, bringing calm to disorder. Notes, songs, harmonies, the silence in between creates spaces in the human heart open to new scenes. Deep yearnings cry in new songs, while tyrants silence the art. Yet deep, deep, deep underground, a new sound is being born. So sing, O Blessed Mary, radical, zealot, gentle mother. Sing of the time of Jubilee coming in our newborn brother. Sing, Blessed Mother, magnify the Lord. Sing of longed-for justice, embody God's new words. The haughty rich now brought low, the humble poor lifted high. No more vast inequities, your cry up to the skies. Sing, Blessed Mary, become a new song. Birth earth's longed-for Messiah who rights every wrong. Teach us, O Mary, the song of new birth, so all of us can embody God's peace here on earth.